Welcome to the Providence College Podcast. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. If you like what you hear, please review and share with others. Email podcast@providence.edu with questions or comments. Go Friars.
Hello and welcome to the Providence College Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Chittum, and I'm joined as always by PC producer and videographer Chris Judge, class of 05. Here at the Providence College Podcast, it's our job to bring you interesting stories from people in and around the Friar family. And today we are very happy to have Professor Richard Battistoni. Rick, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here, Matt.
We were just talking about your lengthy titles. So I'll just break them down real quick. So we have Professor of Political Science and Public and Community Service Studies, as well as Director of the Feinstein Institute for Public Service. You said it was a mouthful. It certainly was. I have to take a deep breath after saying it all. So thank you for being here.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
So for people who don't know you, how long have you been at Providence College?
This is my 23rd year here. I came in 1994.
That's wonderful. So why did you come to Providence College in the first place?
Well, I came because of the Feinstein Institute for Public Service. I had heard and learned about this amazing project that had been funded by Alan Sean Feinstein and the Feinstein Foundation. And at the time, there was a team of faculty and students and community consultants who were developing this brand new interdisciplinary major in public and community service studies. And they were searching externally for a director. And I applied, and it was just a perfect fit for me based on what I had been doing before. I'd been at two different universities before coming to PC. And so it was a perfect fit, and love Providence as well. So it's,
That's
been great.
Well, now, when you talk about the Institute for Public Service, I guess, first of all, kind of in quotes, what is public service? And what does it mean generally? And what does it mean for your program?
Well, that's a great question, Matt. Most people associate public service with working for the government. A public servant is someone who works in some aspect of the public sector. But in this case, public service is much broader to include all kinds of work in the community, volunteer work in nonprofit organizations, as well as work in the public sector and in government or governmentally related areas. And the Public and Community Service Studies name on the major and minor is meant to convey that breadth, that people who go into this want to serve in some way, want to do good and want to benefit and provide resources to their communities and multiple communities. And so it's meant to be broad so people can define exactly what they want to do and be very focused, but they're able to be under this bigger umbrella.
Right. So you have to provide kind of the resources for them to explore a wide range of things and to do it in a way that so there's not just an inch deep and a mile wide, but then provide kind of the depth of experience and knowledge within all the potential areas that they could go into.
That's exactly right. And that's a challenge because our students have a very wide range of interests. Some of them are interested in particular issues like the environment or working with children or senior citizens. And yet, they want to get kind of depth in that. So we have to make sure that we have partnerships in the community that allow for our students to explore and delve deeply into the areas where they have an interest, the things they care about.
Right. So with that in mind, I guess that you kind of have to provide, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm putting words in your mouth here, but you kind of have to provide the learning experience, kind of the foundational experience that allows them to then, go into whatever area from an expertise standpoint, because you can't be personally an expert in all of these different areas. It's more of an expert in the basic field that allows them to then pursue those areas?
That's right. And we really rely on our partners in the community to help provide that experience and depth and expertise. And so students come into the program. Sometimes they come in not declared as majors or minors. They take an intro course where they have an opportunity to do something like 3 to 5 hours a week of volunteer service, of direct service, working in communities. And they have some choice there. As they move through the major and minor, the idea is to get much deeper, to do internship type work, but to be focused in the area where they care most deeply, and where they can learn from a mentor in the community about what work in this area or in this field or in this organization might look like.
And in one of those areas is a class you're teaching now, the Philanthropy Class, which I think it's fantastic. I'm not a PC grad, but I feel like if I went to PC, this is definitely the class I would have been involved in. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm a major gift officer here, but I think it is pretty interesting. Do you mind saying briefly what that is before we kind of explore in detail the impact it has not only on the community, but the students themselves?
Yeah, the class in philanthropy was created about 9 years ago, and it was created largely as the brainchild of a faculty member who's been an adjunct faculty member in the Feinstein Institute for years, Bill Allen, who was a former senior vice president at the United Way. And he had retired, and he developed this course, which not only gave students an understanding of what philanthropy consists of and the different types of philanthropy and the different areas where philanthropy impacts, but it also gives them an opportunity to have a pot of money that they have to make decisions about what their giving priorities are and that they give to nonprofits in Rhode Island. And so they create a request for proposals, they send it out and invite people to apply for grant money, and then they make decisions. They go visit the nonprofits that they identify as finalists, and then they award money to a handful, 2 or 3 or 4 different nonprofits that have made the grade with the application.
Right. So what in the learning process, what do they learn about what philanthropy is and the different ways it can be, I guess, utilized for public service?
Well, they learn that philanthropy involves many different things. It can be the giving of funds, of money. It can be the giving of time, of oneself. And they learn how philanthropy can be leveraged to create greater change in communities. That it's not just about writing a check, but it's about being involving others who might also be involved by giving, and trying to be what we call catalytic in your philanthropy, that you're engaged in the issues and the root causes of the things that create the need for philanthropy in the first place, and that you're trying to involve yourself and others in ways other than just simply writing a check and giving. Not that there's anything wrong with writing checks and giving.
Right. So you're kind of providing like the best case scenario, right? So you're kind of holistically involved in whatever as nonprofit entity that fits whatever you're involved in, whatever you're interested in, or wherever your passions lie. Yes,
and you learn what that means, and you learn what it means to be involved as a corporate. What corporate philanthropy looks like, what government's role in philanthropy might be, what individual or family or foundation philanthropy looks like, and you learn all the different dimensions and the different concerns and challenges that are presented for philanthropy in the 21st century.
Now, the students who take this class, how well versed are they in this topic when they come in? I'm just thinking of myself at that age. From a scale of 0 to 100, I might have been at like a 2 in terms of actual knowledge on this subject.
Well, students' knowledge ranges from almost nothing to a little bit of knowledge. I don't think any of the students come into the class as experts. They come in because they have an interest and they'd like to learn more about it. Actually, of the 20 students enrolled this semester, all of the 20 are seniors, which is interesting, but almost 2/3 of the students are business majors. So they're management or accounting or finance majors. They're not coming from a public service major or so they're scattered. The others are scattered across the liberal arts, but most of the students are business majors, and some of them are interested in either being involved personally in philanthropy or want to go into this field as a career. But not a whole lot of them know a lot about philanthropy. And it's interesting, the first day in class, my co-instructor and I asked them to talk about what their experience with philanthropy had been, and most of them had been involved in some kind of fund drive or Relay for Life or something like that.
Right. So kind of like a Kickstarter, basically a Kickstarter way of philanthropy, right? Try to get a lot of donations, maybe a smaller amount, and then try to kind of spread it out in terms of their communications from that point.
Right. So their background in the system of philanthropy and the structures of philanthropy in the United States is what we're hoping to convey.
And who co-teaches the course with you?
Yeah. So for the last several years, we've been blessed by having a graduate of the course who took the course the very first time that Bill Allen taught the course, Amanda Heinsohn, who is now a major gifts officer at the United Way. And so she's been in the course, and the last several years she's co-taught it as a community co-instructor.
And a PC grad?
And a PC grad,
right?
A marketing major, public service minor, yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And another great example, and we'll go into this a little bit later, of how this major in this class and basically what the entire institute and the majors that you're involved in can have an impact on students, who then can have an impact on society in different ways, which is fantastic. So they have the component of the class where they're learning about what philanthropy is in its various forms, whether it's major gifts to kind of a more broad-based giving model to a government or corporate foundation model. And then once they get to that point, you then move on to, but it seems like they basically are kind of create a foundation of their own, from which point they're starting to figure out the best way of having an impact on the surrounding area.
That's exactly right. And they call themselves the Making a Difference Foundation, and they act as a foundation board. And so they're learning about philanthropy, not only by reading about it, looking at case studies, but by doing it.
Right. So how do they decide which organizations they might support?
Well, the last couple of years, what we've done in the class is, before we ask the students to sit down and figure out what their funding priorities ought to be and write a request for proposals that a nonprofit can respond to with an application, we asked each individual student to write a research advocacy paper where they were asked, what's the most pressing injustice, or what's the most pressing matter that needs philanthropic support in Rhode Island? And so they have to do research on what they think the most pressing issue in Rhode Island is. And then that research includes what organizations they understand are out there that are doing effective work in this area. And the 20 students wrote 20 separate research papers. They read each other's papers, and they came to a consensus about what that meant for their funding priorities. So that's how that came about.
How interesting. So it comes down, obviously there's no correct answer to that question. It really comes down to your ability to argue the point on some level.
Exactly. And it was remarkable that the students didn't all pick the same issue, but there was a consensus that was built around the different issues they picked. And there was a group of organizations that somewhat overlapped in each student's paper. And so they were able to identify the organizations pretty much from all of the research that each of them had done.
So is there a whittling down from that point? So you have, all right, so every student has their input. They then decide, all right, these are some of the themes that we're going to stick to. And then what's the next step in the process?
So then they write a request for proposals.
And it's an RFP.
An RFP, right? And identifying what the funding priorities are, what the parameters are, what the protocol for someone to apply. And it actually has an application form attached to it and what is required of the nonprofit that would apply for funds. And then they whittled down the organizations, and that was done by consensus. So some of the students who may have identified an organization that then thought, well, this probably isn't appropriate for inviting. I think about 30 nonprofits were sent an invitation to apply. We'll see how many applications we get back. It's a short turnaround. They have about 3.5 weeks, almost 4 weeks, the organization to receive the invitation and then to put together an application. And they will whittle themselves down. So I don't think we'll get 30 applications, but however many we get, then the students all read the applications, again, as if they were a board, or they are a board.
Right.
And then they decide, and they've got a scoring mechanism. There's an evaluation committee that is coming up with a protocol for each student to score the applications. And then they'll come together at the end of March and decide who are the finalists. Out of 15 or 20 who may apply, what 5 or 6 or 7 do we think are the ones we want to go visit? And then the students in teams will make a site visit and decide from there who gets the funding.
How interesting. So you have the site visits obviously are key, not only for the nonprofits, but for the students themselves, right? Because you're in a situation where they might not be, they're in a situation where they're having to judge something that they might not be experts in. So how do you prepare them to do that sort of thing?
Well, I think they learn as they go along, because I think the learning in the course is running parallel to the doing philanthropy that they're involved in. And so they get a better sense of what they're looking for. But Amanda and I will be preparing them for when they go out into site, what they should be looking for, what questions they should be asking. Sometimes it's the applications by the nonprofits themselves that will raise the very questions that they want to have addressed when they go on site.
Right.
I'll have to tell you, though, every single year this course has been offered, the site visit has been one of the key learning experiences for the students who've participated in the course. That has been not the key, not only for the nonprofit getting funding and for the students learning about philanthropy, but just getting there and interacting with staff from a nonprofit has been really powerful learning.
So what is the range, I guess the dollar range that are set forth in most of these RFPs?
Well, it varies from year to year. This year we have a total of $18,000 to distribute. Or the class has a total of $18,000 to distribute. And there's the minimum gift as established by the foundation that was the foundation that has been funding the course over the last several years, is $2,000. But some years the students will say the gifts, the grants will range from $2,000 to $5,000. This year the class decided not to put an upper limit on it. So it is possible, although probably not likely, that the class could give all $18,000 to one organization, or they can split it up. The only thing they cannot do is give a gift less than $2,000.
Got it. All right. So, and you just mentioned that the parameters were set forth by the foundation that was funding the class. So how does it work? We'll finish up with the class in a second, but how, from the funding perspective, how do you in the class get funding to then allocate throughout the class?
That's a great question. And I think there are these courses that exist on different campuses around the country. There's a foundation called the Learning by Giving Foundation. It's actually a foundation set up by Doris Buffett, who is Warren Buffett's sister, and who thought that it would be a great thing for students in universities and colleges to learn about philanthropy by doing it in the context of a course. So that foundation has been giving a certain amount, and they're trying to wean Providence College off so they can give to other new college and universities that are establishing these courses. And so we've got a little bit of money from that foundation, and then we've been able to get money from another foundation, a family foundation in Texas, over the next 2 years. And then IA is responding by also matching the funding that we're getting from foundations. So the students aren't going out and raising the funds themselves, and that's a bit of a drawback. But in the course of a semester, it would be impossible for them to raise money and then figure out how to give it away. We'd almost have to have a year,
right,
to be able to do that properly.
Absolutely. And we'll touch on this at the end, but if someone was interested in giving to the class, they could absolutely do that, right, from an individual perspective.
They could, absolutely. And alumni from the class in past years have given money to support the class in future years. So that's been fantastic.
It must be nice for you, too, because obviously that's a pretty big vote of confidence for the experience that they had.
Yeah, but it's not so much me, because this is the first time that I've taught the class, actually. I've been involved in hearing about it and attending the end of the semester celebration and the giving away of the checks. But Bill Allen was the driving force. And if he hadn't stepped down from doing it, he probably would be teaching it this year as well. I was scheduled to be teaching it starting next year, when he's really going to retire from teaching. But he had some other things come up, and so I stepped in for this year.
Right. So as you mentioned, the end of the year is when the kind of the decisions are made formally, and then there's a kind of an announcement of what that happens to be like. So what I know past couple of years they've had at McPhail's, right? The announcement.
Yeah, and there's an events committee that will determine where this is going to happen. And so that hasn't been decided yet, but usually it's in some venue where the organization or representatives from the organizations that are receiving funding come, and they're presented with, the big check that looks good and a photo, and their work is celebrated. And the students who do the site visits usually present the organization that is receiving the funding, because they're the ones who've just recently been in the presence of the staff and at the organization.
Absolutely. So a couple years ago, the Feinstein Institute did kind of a retrospective on those, the first 20 years of the program, and you took a look at the impact that it had for the students who'd gone through the program. So with that in mind, and looking at the students who are going through it now, what are some of the things that has been kind of a central theme for some of these people? And if you could just tell a story or two about the actual impact it had on some of these folks.
Well, we've had about 250 students who have graduated with a major in public and community service studies, and about the same number of students who've graduated with a minor. And those students find themselves in many different jobs and careers. We have a few in the for-profit sector. There are graduates who've been working in nonprofit organizations. A number are teaching either in public or charter or private schools. We have some working in colleges and universities, assisting other students who are doing service and connecting that to the classroom. We've got health professionals. So they're doing a wide range of things. I think the thing that is consistent across the board is that students report that this opportunity to be engaged in meaningful service and then to step back from it and reflect critically on it is the one thing that they continue throughout their lives, that this ability to step back from what you're doing and think about it, and to think about it in terms of whether it has the meaning you hope for, whether it is meeting your expectations, whether it's making you happy, that has been the thing that all students across the board say they take away from the program. In addition to the exposure to important mentors who've stayed mentors in their lives, we've got students who went into work that they didn't think they would go into at all because of being exposed to an introductory service learning course. I'm currently teaching the capstone course in the public service major with an alumna who had a very important experience and continued that experience while an undergraduate working with youth. And now she's doing youth work up in Woonsocket. I don't think she would have said that was what she planned to do with her life, even as a senior at Providence College. So there are a number of cases where students go directly into the work that they get exposed to as a result of being undergraduates. But I think the main thing is that they think critically about what they're doing. They're able to step back from what they're doing and thinking about whether it's making a difference and how they might make a difference in a better way. And I think our students, our graduates, tend to be happy in their lives. And I think that's the most rewarding thing, that they're not disgusted with what they're doing. They're not cynical about the world. I think they can make a difference.
Makes sense. And the critical thinking piece, the reflection, the reflective practice, is that part of the curriculum, or is that kind of a chicken and egg scenario where it was part of the curriculum, or it became part of the curriculum because it was obvious that was having such a big impact on the students? No,
it's been a part of the curriculum from the beginning. It's part of this whole field of community-based learning, service learning, that without reflection, you don't have learning. All you have is experience, and raw experience has to be turned into learning, and reflection tends to be the mechanism to do that. I think students, when they get to be seniors, often think that we do too much reflection. So they're kind of sick of it by the time they're done with their undergraduate career. But I think then they appreciate it when they go out in the world, and they have to think about how they make time for that, because when they're students, it's part of the curriculum. They're expected to do it. And so they make time for it because it's required. When you go out into the world, you have to figure out how I'm going to create a system where I can continue to be a reflective practitioner. when I may not have the time or the opportunity or the partner to do it with.
And there's so many options. As we discussed earlier, when we're talking about the philanthropy class, there's so many different nonprofits out there that are doing great work that in order to really take the holistic, I'm going to put every part of myself into this work, you really have to come to a point of not only understanding yourself, but understanding the possible options that are out there.
Right. And I think for some students, as they move through the major or minor, they do more eliminating areas that they thought they might be interested in, but once they get into it, they realize it's not for them. And then they figure out they're finally get to their way to what they want to do. And that's important too, because if you have that experience as an undergraduate and you rule out a certain type of work or a certain way of being in the world, then you've narrowed your options, and that's good too.
No, absolutely. And you've done a couple presentations that are touched on these themes that we're talking about right now, discovering identity through reflective practice. You did that a couple of years ago, as well as citizen alum, doers, not just donors. And you presented that in Atlanta to the Association of American Colleges and Universities. And we talk about doers, not just donors, a topic that comes up a lot in this podcast. We're talking to not only professors, but students as well, is basically the art of practitionership, not just learning about something. And I think that's something that obviously is a big part of what the Feinstein Institute does generally, and this, the Philanthropy Class does specifically. For you, at what point do you start incorporating, not just you personally, but for your department, would you start incorporating the practitionership piece as opposed to just the learning piece?
That's a great question, and it's been a challenge. Because for our faculty and our staff to be facilitators of student learning, we talk about service and the community-based experience that's part of this curriculum as a kind of text. It's different from a written text or an audio book or something like that. But if it is truly a text, and we believe that, the faculty member or staff member who's trying to facilitate the learning has to be familiar with it. And so we expect our faculty to be involved in community, maybe not at the organizations that all of the students in the class are engaged with, but at least that they know what the students are reading as they experience this organization or this issue. Right. And so there's an expectation that our faculty are engaged in important and meaningful ways, and they are. And so it's a challenge to us we have to be knowledgeable enough to be able to facilitate student learning in areas that most faculty might not be knowledgeable about.
Right. And a lot of people's philanthropic work can, not always does it, but it can kind of reflect their political either aspirations or their political identity. And what you just mentioned before is that sometimes it's nice to cross something off the list, in terms of potential options from a philanthropic standpoint, because there are so many to choose from. So I guess my question is there a fine line between pursuing your passion in this work versus exploring things that you're not either used to or potentially things that you might not be fond of, just so you can get a better understanding of it?
Well, yes, there is a tension there, and there's a tension between allowing students to pursue their passion and the needs that community partners are saying need to be met by our students. So if a student is to pursue her or his passion, but the community needs something different, how do we merge those things together, and how do we create a situation where students are sensitive to the concerns that are in the community, and that how can they make their passions align with what the community's needs are and what the community wants to have done and what they want to see improved in the community. Not to mention the fact that it's a good thing to find out about other things by being exposed to them. And so we always have to walk that tightrope in the program, and we want to honor students' interests and passions, but we also want to honor what our communities are telling us about what they want us to do to provide resources.
Right. And you also have the situation where you don't know what your passions are necessarily until you've experienced certain things.
Right. That's right? Absolutely right.
So you can say my passion is X, but you haven't experienced Y, right? You never know. So it's hard to say, hey, Twinkies are my favorite dessert, but then you go out and you have ice cream. You're like, forget it. No, ice cream is my favorite dessert now. So you have that situation.
That's right. And our students are remarkable in the kind of experiences they bring as freshmen to Providence College. A lot of the students generally, not just public service majors or minors, have done mission work. They've done service work, serious service work as high school students or even before that, or they've been involved with their parents or their families in serious philanthropic or community service work. And they come here, but those weren't always the things that they identified as things they cared about. And so they've been exposed to certain things. So it's important for us to show them, well, here in Providence, here are the concerns that people have. And you have some choice about plugging into this or that, but we want you involved in the things that this community has identified as important.
And you mentioned before that you have alum who come back and they give to the program. Do they also have kind of that partnership role as well?
Well, we have a lot of alums who may not have been from Rhode Island, but have stayed here because they got involved in community as a public service major or minor, like Amanda, and a whole host of other students who have come to Providence and fell in love with it or got involved in the community work. And so some of our alums are our community partners or work at organizations where our students are volunteering. Some alums don't, but then they come back and they mentor students or they help conduct mock interviews for seniors or contribute in other ways.
In fact, we did a podcast 2 months ago with Lisa Gillette from Foster Forward. And I think she's another great example of that, as someone who's gone through the program and who has had a major impact, not only in Rhode Island, but just this specific area at Foster Forward and all the great work that she's been doing. And I know she works with you guys as well.
Yeah. She's going to be a guest in the philanthropy course this semester. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know this is going to come out in a couple of weeks, just before Giving Tuesday, which is going to be a big push here at PC. It's our first Giving Day. So if someone was interested in giving to the Philanthropy Class, I think the best way to go is to givetopc.org, and then you can write in where you want your gift to go to. But just specifically for you, as you see people kind of starting their I guess the part of their life where they're starting to give from, whether it's, their senior class gift or they're expanding out into local nonprofits, and, the students, as they kind of increase their income and their capacity to make change from a giving perspective, what kind of tidbits of advice do you like to give to these folks?
Well, I think the most important thing I would say is to think about how you can do more than give. But give in a way that you get involved with the cause that you're giving to in some way. You don't have to throw yourself into it. You don't have to sacrifice all of your time, but just get involved so that you can be a catalytic philanthropist, that you can be someone who does more than just give.
That's great. Well, you're doing that right now. You're being a catalyst for all of these students who we hope are going to have a big impact in the Providence area and beyond. So thank you for everything you do.
Well, thanks. And thanks for inviting me. I've enjoyed this.
Our pleasure.